Have you ever wondered what happens when an entire country just snaps? When the people have had enough of bread prices being higher than their hopes for the future? Well, let's turn back the clock to late 18th century France, a place of glittering palaces and grinding poverty, where the smell of revolution was in the air, mixed with the scent of expensive perfume and, well, less pleasant things. France was ruled by King Louis XVI. Now, Louis wasn't exactly a villain from a fairy tale. He was more like that one friend who means well but is just kind of clueless. He inherited a kingdom that was basically broke. Why? A few reasons. His predecessors, like the famous son King Louis XIV, had spent a fortune on lavish lifestyles and glorious palaces like Versailles. Plus, France had just helped America win its independence from Britain. That's a nice thing to do, but wars are incredibly expensive, and France's credit card was maxed out. To make matters worse, a series of bad harvests sent bread prices soaring. For the average person, who spent most of their income on bread, this was a disaster. Imagine your rent suddenly becoming 10 times more expensive. You'd be pretty upset, right? The people were starving, and they looked at the royal family, living it up in Versailles, and thought, hey, that doesn't seem fair. Queen Marie Antoinette, an Austrian princess, became a symbol of this out-of-touch extravagance. The famous line, "Let them eat cake," was probably never said by her, but it perfectly captured the public's perception of her. French society was rigidly divided into 3 groups or estates. The first estate was the clergy, the church. The second estate was the nobility. Together, they made up about 2% of the population, but owned most of the land and paid almost no taxes. Everyone else, from wealthy merchants to poor peasants, was lumped into the third estate. They were the 98%, and they carried the entire tax burden of the country on their shoulders. It was a system just begging for a revolution, facing total bankruptcy. Louis XVI finally did something drastic. In 1789, for the first time in 175 years, he called a meeting of the Estates General, a kind of French parliament, to try and solve the money problems. The plan was to raise taxes. But here's the catch: each estate got 1 vote, so the clergy and the nobility, the first 2 estates, could always outvote the third estate, 2-1. The representatives of the third estate, filled with new Enlightenment ideas about liberty, equality, and the rights of man, realized this was a rigged game. So, they did something truly revolutionary. They walked out and declared themselves the National Assembly, the true representatives of the French people. They gathered at a nearby indoor tennis court and took the famous tennis court oath, vowing not to stop until they had written a new constitution for France. The revolution had officially begun. Word of this defiance spread like wildfire through Paris. The common people, already on edge due to hunger and anger, were inspired. On July 14, 1789, fearing the king would use his army to crush the new assembly, a massive crowd stormed the Bastille, a medieval fortress used as a prison. The Bastille wasn't actually full of political prisoners. It was more of a symbol of the king's oppressive power. Its fall was a huge symbolic victory. It showed that the people were no longer afraid. July 14th is still celebrated as France's National Day. The revolution spread to the countryside. Peasants, fearing the nobles would strike back, rose up in what was called the Great Fear, burning manor houses and destroying records of their feudal obligations. The old order was literally going up in smoke. In response, the National Assembly issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen. This document was a game changer, proclaiming that all men were born free and equal in rights. It talked about liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. Sound familiar? It was heavily inspired by the American Declaration of Independence. But the king was still at Versailles, and the people of Paris were still hungry. In October, a crowd of thousands of Parisian women, fed up with the price of bread, marched the 12 miles to Versailles. Armed with pitchforks and whatever they could find, they demanded the king and his family move to Paris. Trapped and intimidated, Louis agreed. The royal family became virtual prisoners in the capital, and power had decisively shifted to the people and the revolutionaries. For the next couple of years, the revolutionaries tried to set up a constitutional monarchy, where the king would still be the head of state, but with his power limited by a constitution. But Louis was not a fan of this new arrangement. In 1791, he and his family tried to flee France in disguise. They were caught near the border and brought back to Paris in disgrace. This escape attempt destroyed any remaining trust the people had in him. It became clear he was a traitor to the revolution. Meanwhile, other European monarchies, like Austria and Prussia, were getting nervous. They didn't want the revolutionary ideas of liberty and equality spreading to their own countries. So, they threatened to intervene, which led to France declaring war on them in 1792. The war started badly for France, and panic gripped Paris. The radical faction of the revolution, the Jacobins, led by figures like Maximilien Robespierre, gained more power. They argued that the revolution couldn't be safe as long as the king was alive. This radicalization led to one of the most intense and terrifying phases of the revolution, the Reign of Terror. In September 1792, the monarchy was abolished, and France was declared a republic. A few months later, in January 1793, King Louis XVI was put on trial for treason and executed by a new, more humane invention, the guillotine. The crowd cheered as his head was held up. The point of no return had been crossed. Robespierre and the Committee of Public Safety took control, vowing to protect the revolution from its enemies, both foreign and domestic. And by protect, they meant executing anyone suspected of being a counter-revolutionary. Over the next year, tens of thousands of people were arrested, and about 17,000 were officially executed by the guillotine. It was a time of extreme paranoia, a wrong word, a complaint about the price of bread, or even not seeming enthusiastic enough about the revolution could get you sent to the national razor. Even Marie Antoinette met her end at the guillotine in October 1793. The terror was supposed to create a republic of virtue, but it quickly spiraled out of control. Robespierre, once hailed as the incorruptible, became a dictator, eliminating his political rivals one by one. Eventually, the other revolutionaries feared they would be next. In a dramatic turn of events in July 1794, Robespierre himself was arrested and executed by the very system of terror he had created. The fall of Robespierre marks the end of the Reign of Terror. After the Terror, France entered a period of instability. The government was weak, the economy was still a mess, and the country was still at war. People were tired of the chaos. They longed for stability and a strong leader to restore order. And that's when a young, ambitious, and brilliant general stepped onto the stage. His name was Napoleon Bonaparte. In 1799, Napoleon seized power in a coup d'etat, effectively ending the French Revolution. He would go on to crown himself emperor, create a vast European empire, and change the face of the continent forever. But that's a story for another time. So, what was the legacy of the French Revolution? It was a messy, violent, and chaotic decade, but its impact was profound. It completely dismantled the old feudal system in France and spread the ideas of liberty, equality, and fraternity across the world. It showed that ordinary people could rise up and overthrow an unjust system. It laid the groundwork for modern democracy, secularism, and the concept of the nation-state. The French Revolution is a powerful reminder that history is not just made by kings and generals, but by ordinary people demanding a better future. It's a complex and often brutal story, but one that fundamentally shaped the world we live in today. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey through revolutionary France interesting, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Let us know in the comments what historical event you'd like us to explore next. Until then, stay curious.